First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
If you want to understand a man, start by understanding their great-grandfather. Take this imaginary person, Derek. I mean, that's a real photo, but I don't know this person. Take Derek, for example. Derek loves to work. Derek puts in 60 hours a week happily, making his family financially stable. Derek keeps his yard immaculate and is judging yours. Derek completes every task you give him. You want to work with Derek. Derek's not great at relaxing, despite this photo, but he is great at getting the job done. But to understand a little bit more about Derek, we would need to meet his great-grandfather, Edvard. Edvard had a happy childhood, got married, had his little baby Teddy, and then Edvard died on the Western Front in 1918. Mom died 3 months later in the flu epidemic. So baby Teddy was sent to an orphanage, where he was reminded on a daily basis how much a burden he was, financially, morally. This got much worse during the Great Depression. So Teddy learned to work and work and work until he was independent. Teddy got married, had a son, David. David learned from his father, Teddy, how to work and work and work. Now, David was a good baby boomer in the 60s, so he rebelled against his dad and this obsession with work for money. David pursued a career that had purpose and meaning, Dad. David got married and had a son, Derek. Derek grew up learning from his father how to work and work and work. And like a good Gen X, rebelled against his dad by seeking financial stability. Now, your eye may be on the shell game of this story. Which generation worked for stability and which worked to fulfill its purpose? That's just the shell game. Keep your eye on the red ball. When great-grandpa Edvard died, Teddy's orphanage traumatized him, teaching him over and over that he needed to earn his right to exist. So begins a trauma that is passed down from generation to generation, a profound anxiety about self-worth that can only be soothed by working and working. Father models to son, who models to son, and so forth, that the only way to experience meaning in this life is to work and work and work. Passing down the most important lesson, father to son. This is how we survived. Could have been drinking. Could have been having children with a dozen women and leaving them all. As far as an intergenerational pattern of coping with trauma goes, working too hard is a safer option. This is not a story of shame and judgment. No one is mad at Edvard for dying on the Western Front. No one is mad at Teddy for surviving an abusive childhood. No one blames David for working hard and a purpose-driven career. No one could be mad at Derek for providing that steady income and perfect lawn. The point here is not blame. The point here is to notice the pattern. And I think everyone here has a pattern to notice in their own family's story across generations, the story of how we survived. Please be tender with yourself. Please return to your breath and notice what you feel in your body right now. Now, I made up Derek's story from an amalgam of 10 stories I know, but I would guess that Derek's story is one of the most common stories in America. It's almost baked into the American experience, right? The first one to come to the New World has to overfunction. That's how we survived. This month of June, our theme is flourishing together. I will remind us of that. And 2 weeks ago, I preached a very upbeat sermon on the possibilities of a flourishing garden, the dance of sun and soil and seed and water and nutrients, the give and take of resources that makes for flourishing. But today we're asked to think about the conditions for flourishing. Because it turns out you and I don't grow in theoretical soil. We aren't placed in a pot with a bag of potting soil. We grow in a specific patch of land. And land has history. Sometimes the land is boggy or weedy or was a toxic dump. And that affects you because you and I don't grow in theoretical soil. We grow where we are planted. What a dark way to begin a sermon, Steve. This is the longest day of light all year. This is Father's Day. Let me pause. Happy Father's Day, everyone. I love being a dad. I love my dad. Hi, Dad. I love being your dad. I'm not trying to ruin the vibes on this twofold holiday. But I do feel the need to take seriously the stories I hear from people about their complicated relationships with dads. I hear, he loved me in his own way, I guess. I hear, I'm mad that he left us, but I'm really grateful for the way my mom raised us. Or most painfully, I hear, he was a great dad when he was in a good mood. We have complicated feelings about dads. It's different being a biological father than being a biological mother. It's different from the get-go. For the biological father, there is no ongoing creation of this human after conception. You are not gestating anyone. You might not even know that you've become a biological father. It's a different level of initial investment. Now, I know many fathers who are amazing co-parents every single day. Shout out to you all. I'm not saying that fathers can't play an essential role in the child's life, that they can't even be an amazing single parent. They can, I know them. But I'm saying that the biological mother has to play that essential role in creating the child. So I think that's one of the reasons it's complicated from the get-go, but I think more broadly, we can name that we live in a society that sets this kind of a bar for men and this kind of a bar for those in the mothering role. See also my Mother's Day sermon. We put these absolutely impossible expectations on those in the mother role while we praise a dad for babysitting their own child. Can you hear what that sounds like? It's not babysitting, it's yours. The same culture that teaches me as a man that I should know how to fix any car or appliance in my house, which I don't, also cultivates this sort of learned helplessness around parenting, a cultivated inability to know how to help children play or learn or even emotionally regulate. So I think it's complicated, our relationships, but I think the main reason that people often have a complicated relationship with their father is deeper. And I want to suggest it has a lot to do with your great-grandfather. How did they survive? What were the soil conditions in which they were raised? So this is where we get tender. I think many of us, I would say probably most of us, inherit some kind of intergenerational trauma. That is a psychological term defined by the American Psychological Association as the transmission of trauma or its legacy in the form of psychological consequences of an injury, attack, or poverty from the generation experiencing the trauma to subsequent generations. A quick pause. You understand? So whatever happened in 1910 affects you in 2026. The transference of this effect is believed to be epigenetic. Oh, let me try that again. There it is. The transmission affects the chemical marker for a gene. The trauma experienced by the older generation is translated into a genetic adaptation that can be passed on to successive generations. The trauma reactions vary by generation, but include shame, increased anxiety and guilt, a heightened sense of vulnerability and helplessness, low self-esteem, depression, intrusive thoughts, and I'm going to pause there to say that they list all the reasons that we go to therapy. Passed on. That is to say, when great-grandpa Edvard died, when Grandpa Teddy went through the Great Depression, earning his keep as a child 50 hours a week, he survived. He survived with hypervigilance. He learned a profound anxiety around money. He learned a conditional sense of self-esteem. I'm only valuable if I work. And I know a lot of us have heard this from someone in the family. If I can't work, take me out back and shoot me, right? He learned this, and he passed this on to his son. And not just in genetic expression, but in his behaviors. How we survived. Dr. Monica Vilhauer writes of generational trauma. The term was first used in the 1960s because researchers observed the high rates of psychological distress experienced not just by Holocaust survivors, but by the children of Holocaust survivors who weren't conceived until after the war. How does trauma get passed down over the course of generations? She writes, and this is long, but it's worth going through. There's actually a lot of ways this can happen. The most intuitive is parenting behaviors. She says, if I lose someone in a car accident, for example, I might become incredibly overprotective about what my children can and cannot do, especially when it comes to riding in cars. My children then become accustomed to anxiety around cars, or even anxiety about leaving the house. Years later, when my children then have children of their own, they will use the same norms and same values that they were raised with to raise their children, including an anxiety around cars. I think that one makes intuitive sense to us, right? Whatever you learn becomes normal for you. And at some point in high school, your friends go, why do you do it that way? And you go, I don't know, that's just how we always do it, right? She continues, the opposite can be true in cases where parents don't talk about their trauma, and it becomes a source of anxiety because of the silence that is always lingering, a common effect in veterans, right? Then she says there's generational trauma that still exists because the conditions of the trauma still lingers. Issues like poverty or discrimination that resulted from enslavement or displacement of Native American communities still exist today, even though enslavement and colonization ended before our generations. So the fruits of intergenerational trauma may change from one generation to the next. Keep your eye on the soil. To put it succinctly, James Baldwin, who knew something about this, said, history is not the past, it is the present. We carry our history with us. We carry the story of how we survived. We carry our ancestors' adaptations and lessons for survival, even if those adaptations aren't for flourishing. And we have the capacity to heal. You know this. To till, to amend, and yes, fix the soil out of which we were raised. In his groundbreaking book that I cannot recommend highly enough, My Grandmother's Hands, Resmaa Menakem argues that we can process these traumas that are passed down across generations. Most of the time, not recognizing them, not noticing the patterns, not naming them, we take our pain and we avoid it, we deny it, we blame it on someone. This is what he calls dirty pain, pain that is just not dealt with. Dirty pain produces shame and guilt and self-judgment and leaves the self-help book section filled. It sounds like, I really shouldn't feel this way. It sounds like, oh, other people have it worse than me. But it looks like distracting yourselves with drink or work, like Teddy's family. Menakem encourages us to deal with clean pain, or as he puts it, abiding with our grief therapeutically. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron teaches this skill beautifully as well. Sitting in the space between the painful stimulus and our conditioned response. There is a pause between the painful stimulus and the conditioned response. And Chodron says, just notice the pause, breathe in the pause, and let it pass through. Menakem argues that we need to acknowledge that pain resides not so much here, but in our actual bodies. One of the primary theses of his book is that healing is not just a thought exercise. It is what he calls somatic. Right? The body, not the thinking brain, quote, is where we experience most of our pain, pleasure, and joy, and where we process most of what happens to us. It is also where we do most of our healing, including emotional and psychological healing. It is where we experience resilience and a sense of flow. In short, somatic treatment, somatic therapy means settling your body, listening to your breath come in and out, and then noticing where you hold tension, not judging, noticing, and staying present in it. When people experience a wave of grief when doing a yoga pose or massage, I know a lot of people have that experience. That's a small indicator of how trauma resides in the body, or as another author puts it, how the body keeps the score. I am not a therapist. I am not a somatic therapist. I cannot stand here and tell us all what we should do this week. But I can tell you that I have found these practices to be genuinely liberatory, both for myself and for anyone who has to deal with me. Yeah. The point is not that Derek has a bad work-life balance and should read more Oprah. The point is not that Derek overworks because his dad was a bad dad. The point is that Derek and his ancestors before him survived. Under incredibly difficult circumstances, Teddy survived. You are here today drawing breath because your ancestors survived. Can you feel the strength in knowing that baked into you is a resilience? Your ancestors survived wars and famines and devastating traumas that we can't even imagine in 2026. For you and I to gather today to discuss what are the conditions for our optimal flourishing, that's our grandmother's prayers. That's our grandfather's dreaming that we could sit here and talk that way. Father's Day, yes, it reminds us of the complexity of the family system, of the traumas and the painful processes of our ancestors' journeys. It does. I know. I'm sorry. I love you. But it also reminds us of our capacity to flourish, to abide in clean pain and honor the therapeutic journey of our bodies, minds, and hearts, to continue our ancestors' story of surviving, yes, but also the opportunity to write new chapters of flourishing for each new generation, to add our prayers and dreamings for our grandchildren. As we began June, we noted that a garden flourishes not because of one great plant, the one great plant theory of history. It flourishes because of the interplay of resources, that dance of sun and soil and water and seeds and nutrients. You cannot heal the story of your family with a solo intellectual thought. We heal only and always in relationship with others. We gather together here at First Unitarian in all of our messiness to support one another, to share perspectives and courage and humor and grief and wisdom with one another. And if it's your week, also treats. Let me give an example. This last weekend, there it is, we moved our physical bodies together in public through the city streets. And in doing so, we rewrote an old and traumatic story about sin and abomination. And we rewrote that story, claiming together the holiness of all bodies, the holiness of all love. That is somatic healing right there, together. The songs say it best. We sang earlier that we are the fruit of many generations. We are seeds of life divine. We are living stones upholding living stones. And as we will sing in just a moment, we are lovers of life, builders of future nations, and the wisdom of past ages. So take courage, dear ones, for today is a great, great day to heal, a great day to give thanks, and a day to sing our praises to our ancestors. Because as the song goes, your loving is a miracle, and you are deeply connected to my soul. Amen.